Welcome back to Praying the Psalms in a World on Fire. I am your host, Tom First, and today we are actually going to, for the first time, dive into the Psalms. And we're actually going to begin where the Psalter begins, Psalm 1. Psalm 1 is often dismissed as overly simplistic or even moralistic, but what I would like to argue for you today is that Psalm 1 is a manifesto for how communities can resist imperial propaganda. So let's actually begin by reading Psalm 1 from the New Revised Standard Version, the updated edition. Happy are those who do not follow the advice of the wicked, or take the path that sinners tread, or sit in the seat of scoffers. But their delight is in the Torah of the Lord, the law of the Lord. And on this law they meditate day and night. They're like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season, and their leaves do not wither. In all that they do, they prosper. The wicked are not so. They are like chaff that the wind drives away. Therefore, the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Psalm 1, as you will notice as we move through the Psalms, Psalm 1 does not begin like a normal psalm. It doesn't even sound like a normal psalm. There is no plea, no laments, no praise. It doesn't even sound like a prayer. In fact, it sounds more like proverbs than poetry. And that is actually kind of the point. The editors of the Psalter placed this wisdom poem at the gate, a portal, as Jerome called it, so that anyone who enters into Israel's prayer book has to walk through this question first. Which voice will you listen to? Psalm 1 names two voices or two paths: the path of the righteous and the path of the wicked. And that might sound overly simplistic or even moralistic, but in its context, it's actually about competing systems of formation. In exile and under empire, the people of God were constantly catechized by imperial values. The imperial values of productivity, of dominance, of self-interest. Quote, counsel of the wicked is not just a matter of having a bad group of friends, as I was taught as a teenager. It is rather the chorus of empire shaping how we think and how we behave. Psalm 1 begins with verbs of movement: walk, stand, sit. It is a slow capture of attention. First, you walk in the empire's advice. Then you take your stand among its slogans. And then you sit down and you call it common sense. The empire's propaganda rarely coerces us. It is designed to seduce us, to allure us until we have finally fully internalized it. That is, until we identify with it and our identity is wrapped up in it. But Psalm 1 says, blessed is the person who resists. But how do I resist this? The answer is to delight in Torah. To delight in Torah not as a law to obey, but as instruction, as divine teaching, as a wise counter-narrative to the allure of empire. The psalmist's imagination is then filled not with imperial decrees, but with stories. Commands, instructions, and songs that tell us a different truth about reality altogether, a different truth than that presented by empire. To meditate on Torah in Hebrew literally means to murmur it out loud. That is, to meditate on Torah is to keep God's words reverberating in your mouth so that empire's slogans don't take over your tongue. In every age, power systems spread their propaganda. In Babylon, the gods rewarded strength. In Rome, the peace came through violence. In our world, value is measured by productivity and visibility and how many followers you have. But Psalm 1 calls the bluff of all of those systems of propaganda. Psalm 1 says that flourishing comes not by domination, but by delight, not from propaganda, but from faithful, wise practice. The righteous person, Psalm 1 says, is like a tree planted by streams of water. Planted, not uprooted every time the winds of ideology blow or the next president is elected. Planted. It turns out that in an empire built on exploitation, stability itself is rebellion. Friends, in our next episode, which will also be planted in Psalm 1, we're going to take a closer look at that image of the tree. We're going to look at its roots, its fruit, its resilience, and how meditation on Torah as God's wisdom creates communities that cannot be co-opted by empire. Because the Psalms are teaching us to pray, to resist in a world on fire.